The story you're about to hear is a compilation of documented true facts about historical characters, events, or locations. Please sit back and listen as I narrate this story to you. Christina Kettlewell's body was discovered floating in the Severn River by a local boathouse owner in 1947. The most unsettling detail was that her body was discovered in 9 inches of water, only 150 feet from her honeymoon cottage. Nearby, the cabin where she and her husband, Jack Kettlewell, had spent their honeymoon was on fire. The fire's origin is unknown. Investigators believe the Toronto woman died before the final licks of fire sputtered out among the charred remains of her honeymoon cottage just up the hill. A post-mortem examination revealed that she had no burn marks or signs of violence on her body. On May 20, 1947, her husband, Jack, a war veteran, stationed in the Dental Corps, and his friend Ronald Barrie escaped the blazing cottage alive. More than 70 years later, the death of Toronto's 8-day bride is still echoed in Severn Falls folklore and a suppressed memory for living Kettlewell family members who had almost no idea she existed. Christina Cecilia Mocon was born in Toronto, Canada in 1925. Her parents were devout Roman Catholics and Polish immigrants. Christina was 22 years old and working in an Ontario bank. She went missing for a week on May 12, 1947 and was discovered by her sister. She had been living with her 3-year boyfriend, John Ray Kettlewell, whom everyone referred to as Jack. Christina's sister left after an argument and the couple decided to elope. Ronald Barrie, a 28-year-old best friend, was there to witness their marriage. Jack was born in Ontario in 1921. He was a World War II veteran who worked in the dental division. The mystery began on May 12, 1947, with Jack and Christina's secret wedding. Christina's parents were opposed to the marriage because Jack was not Roman Catholic and they never gave their approval. Though Jack converted, the couple's elopement was upsetting for Christina's family. The overwhelming presence of Barrie, whom they suspected was in love with Christina, also irritated them. The newlyweds spent the first few days of their honeymoon in a Toronto apartment on Tyndall Avenue before moving to a cabin in the woods of Severn Falls, Ontario, with Jack's best friend, Ronald Barrie, on May 17, 1947. Barrie, formerly known as Ronnie Ciufo, immigrated to Canada from northern Italy and attempted but failed to establish himself in the construction and insurance industries. Severn Falls was nestled between 2 rivers, and the cottage was practically on the water's edge. Christina began acting out of character as soon as they arrived at the cabin. Throughout the day, she was dazed and would burst into tears. She admitted to Ronnie that Jack had never loved her. On May 20, Ronnie went sunbathing and while doing so, noticed smoke coming out of the cottage. He dashed back to the now burning cottage. He rushed inside to find a disoriented Jack bleeding profusely from a large gash on his forehead. Christina wasn't to be found. Ronnie snatched Jack and drove him to the hospital before calling the cops. Jack had no recollection of the attack or the time before it, and his system was flooded with codeine, an opioid, which was later discovered in his wife's autopsy report. Christina Kettlewell's autopsy report revealed no evidence of burning, bruising, or even assault. Her death was caused by drowning. Jack was released from the hospital after a 3-hour investigation. Ronald's 13-hour investigation followed. The police recorded a 3,000-word statement that was simply described as brilliant. The case received extensive media coverage. For some strange reason, Jack and Ronald had begun to be treated as celebrities. Christina was later revealed to be mentally unstable, and she was writing suicide notes about her obsession with Jack, expressing her fear that she was just a passing fancy and that if she couldn't have him, no one could. On Easter Sunday, April 6, a suicide letter revealed Christina had allegedly attempted suicide by poisoning, according to the inquest. According to his testimony, Jack claimed his then-fiancée was ill that day, but he had no idea she had written a suicide letter addressed to Barrie, detailing her uncertainty about receiving a proposal. "This will be the best way out, as I cannot bear to see another girl have him," the note said. An RCMP handwriting expert testified that the suicide notes were undoubtedly written by Christina. At the end of April, she tried on both her life and Jack's, as per the suicide notes. "When you love someone, you really love him, and I know there is no one for me but Jack. And if I cannot have him, I do not intend anyone else to. I waited, as you might say, in the hope that Jack would ask me to marry him. But I now realize I am just a passing fancy," she wrote in another letter to Barrie. The final letter was written the day before her death and addressed to Mrs. Thomas, the woman who owned a home in Mimico where she briefly stayed with Jack. Christina asked Barrie to mail it. "Ronnie is in the boat outside somewhere," the note said. "By the time he gets back, everything will be over with. He must have been afraid something would happen because he's staying an extra day to make sure we go back to Toronto with him." Barrie saved the suicide notes from the fire and didn't tell Jack about Christina's strange behavior until the inquest. Jack suspected his tall, dark-haired best friend was working in the shadows to keep him safe. Another theory is that Jack and Ronald planned to kill Christina and make it appear as if she had committed suicide. Jack had purchased a life insurance policy on Christina, which would pay out after her death. They'd done some shady insurance deals in the past, naming each other as beneficiaries. Neither of them was ever arrested, and they were regarded as fire victims. C.P. Hope, the special Crown Counsel at the inquest, was immediately suspicious of Barrie's presence. Hope described him as a blatant liar whose sinister figure pervades the entire tragedy, but whose purpose and design are shrouded in mystery. The inquest revealed several strange and dubious money transactions involving Barrie at a time when he was bankrupt. Barrie was named as the beneficiary on two separate $5,000 life insurance policies purchased by Jack and Christina prior to their elopement. The policies included a double indemnity provision, which meant that if Barrie died in an accident, he would receive twice the amount. When adjusted for inflation, it comes to $260,000 today. He also paid $5,000 in insurance for the cottage, which is worth $65,000 today. Jack gave his wartime pay to a friend, and a ring he borrowed from a married friend to propose to Christina was never returned after her death. In today's money, it was worth around $13,000. But why did Jack leave his family out of his will, give his earnings to Barrie, and allow his friend to accompany him on his honeymoon? Jack's evasive responses to these questions did not satisfy Crown lawyer Hope, but a statement he made to police after the fire provided a small glimpse into a possible motivation: love. Jack admitted to a long-term affair with Barrie in this statement, which was entered as an exhibit in the court. However, when confronted with the exhibit, Jack testified that he was coerced into making the admission, saying that is what the police were trying to make. Some believe that Jack and Ronald were in a homosexual relationship and that when this was revealed to Christina, she was pushed over the edge, burned down the cabin to kill the lovers, and committed suicide. Wayne Turner, the current co-owner of the Severn Falls Marina, said the man's close relationship and frequent trips up north were discussed by locals, including his uncle, who was 10 years old at the time of the inquest. Christina Kettlewell died because of drowning, according to a coroner's report. In her stomach, there were traces of codeine. As a result of this, as well as the suspicious fact that she was found drowned in 9 inches of water, the jury returned an open verdict in the case, unable to agree on whether foul play was involved in Christina's death. Official court proceedings began on June 19, 1947, and both John and Ronald were found not guilty after a lengthy trial due to a lack of incriminating evidence. The detailed investigation and inquest, on the other hand, provided extensive insight into the trio's complicated and disturbing life. Even after the verdict, the twisted love triangle and possibly unnatural relationship between them drew a lot of public attention. Jack married another woman and started a family 3 years after the tragedy, briefly living in the same house that he and Christina shared. He never mentioned Christina or the incident. It was even unknown to his children, who only found out about it decades later while reading in a library. In contrast, Ronald simply relocated to New York City in 1956. His final possession, a pet dog, was given to Jack's son as a gift. Ronald's whereabouts were never known. In a sick twist of fate, the case became so well known and Jack Kettlewell became something of a celebrity because he was so attractive. He seemed to enjoy his celebrity a little too much, as he signed autographs for people who recognized him from the papers, even though he was only famous for having a dead wife. There are far too many unanswered questions to figure out what happened to this 8-day bride. Hey everyone! I just wanted to express how grateful I am that you took time out of your day to listen to my narration. This is Nikki of Twysted Mind, and I'd like to wish you a wonderful rest of your day. Salamat!